Hi, everyone. Welcome to Writer of the Week. Today we're here with Shelley Louise, author of Damaged Goods. Welcome, Shelley. How are you today?
I'm great, Melissa. Thank you for having me.
So, what was the catalyst that made you want to write this book, and when did that happen?
Well, I always knew that I wanted to write my memoir, but what really came to me very clearly was probably in 2009 after I had read this excellent memoir by Nathan McCall. He had been somewhat of a thug, I'd have to say, who had made his way through the streets and then eventually to prison, and then made his way to the Washington Post as a writer. And I was so impressed with his book and his writing. And I just thought, if this guy can do it, I can do it. And, I ended up reading his book twice, very inspired by his writing. And I decided to start writing my own book. And that's really where it all began. I, at that point, started writing my own notes. And it was like a 9-year process for me. My mother had always had encouraged me to read all along the line. And even though my mom was an addict and I was an addict throughout the years, we always read books. So even in my addiction and her depression and addiction, we always read no matter what. So, yeah.
And you led a pretty raw lifestyle. And I have to ask, why are you putting yourself out there like this?
Well, we come into this, in recovery, demoralized, full of self-hatred, low self-esteem, and lots of fear and insecurity, shame and guilt, and, guilt, secrets, and everything else. If somebody isn't willing to put themselves out there, then, we just remain there, feeling all of this stuff. And it's so important that those of us who have been around a little bit longer, somebody has to be willing to put it out there. We've done these things, but, we have also healed from some of these things that we have done. So I think it's really important that someone is willing to say, yeah, yes, I did do that. And yes, I did that as well. But I've also made amends for some of the things that I've done, and I've healed from some of those other things. I made a lot of mistakes in recovery as well, but that's probably because I wasn't really sure about what I was doing. I didn't have excellent role models at home. I didn't have anybody that was really showing me the way. So my process was a little bit longer, and that's okay. The point being is that we make mistakes. We have an opportunity to correct them. And, raw as it is, I'm willing to put it out there and show people that they're not alone. And I think that that is super important.
Now, you mentioned that heroin was your drug of choice, yet you've managed to put together 35 years. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Heroin was my drug of choice. I loved using heroin. It definitely was my partner for many, many years. But, when I came into recovery, I really had that experience. I tapped into a little bit at a time of self-esteem, a little bit of self-respect, that I had never had before. I was emotionally immature, and, slowly but surely, I was being given these little gifts and these little glimpses of what it felt like to be a functional person. And, there was no comparison to that. I had the experience of going to court for my daughter. And I'll tell you what, it was pretty bad. It was awful. They were telling me about the condition that my daughter was in when CPS had showed up to at my door because I had left her unattended. And, I cried like a baby. she was in bad shape. She wasn't clean, all of those things. And I realized at that time that, I was a bad mother, and I had a lot of amends to make, and that my family had been devastated by the disease of addiction. And I really needed to be able to break the chain of events that had happened to my family. And it was time for me to get myself together. And I was committed from that point on.
And tell us about the title of your book and how you came up with that.
Damaged goods. Well, most addicts and alcoholics do not come to recovery unscathed, and I'm certainly no exception. We put ourselves in so many precarious, dangerous situations to maintain our addiction. And, and one of the probably the more dramatic things that happened to me was that when I was a teenager, I was in a group of other people. We were all getting high, and we were shooting up intravenously. And what happened was it cut off the circulation into my hand. And within 30 minutes, I was at the hospital. And within 3 days, gangrene had set in, and my right hand had to be amputated. Now, I was 17 years old. I had no coping skills. I was 17, and I really didn't know what to do with all of that. And, you would think that something that dramatic would get you to straighten up right away, but it did not. I used for another 13 years. I went into a deep depression, and I was devastated. So when I say damaged goods, I not only meant physically, but emotionally, spiritually, mentally. I felt like I was really damaged. It's been a long road, a long process, and a long journey for me.
I really like the book cover. It's very beautiful. And was there anything that surprised you along the way in the process of writing the book?
I'm sorry, could you say that again, please?
Was there anything that surprised you along the way in the process of writing the book?
Well, one thing that did surprise me along the way was, I felt like I had really processed, so much of this information over the years. And it felt like I had, fully healed, but I really realized that there was just so much when it came down to it, where I was still pretty raw. I was still, a lot of it was still really heart-rendering, to go back to talking about my mother and the events that transpired, when I was a kid. Those were the things that probably surprised me the most. The other things, probably not so much, but yeah.
And how about your experience with the method that you chose to publish? How was that?
The public?
The publishing.
The publishing. That was okay. Actually, I got quite a bit of support with that. I went through a nice little editing company, and was able to get some decent support with publishing. So I felt pretty good about that. It was a little easier than I had anticipated. Yeah.
And what do you hope to accomplish having written this book, Shelley?
My hopes is really just being able to inspire someone who wants to be inspired. I want to be of service. That is my intention. just to simply be of service. You know, I have a website, I have a blog that I keep up with on a weekly basis that has to do with recovery-based information. And, you know, that truly is my intention. You know, if I become a millionaire in the process, well, that would be awesome. But that really isn't what the intention is.
Shelley's book is available on Amazon, and if you want to find out more, you can go to her website, shelleylouise.net. Thank you so much for being with us today, and we wish you a lot of success with your book, Shelley.
Thank you so much, Melissa. It's been a pleasure.